God, we're almost 2 months into, Israel's war on Gaza, and most recently, and we'll talk about there's been temporary truce, I don't even like the word humanitarian pause. I don't really understand how that sounds like a humane society, humanitarian pause, rawr. Like, it's not really there's nothing humanitarian about what's happening right now. But I will just say the biggest news story for me adjacent to the war on Gaza and the mass crimes there, is the discrepancy in media coverage. I think that anyone who is sort of an investigative journalist, or anyone who's an analyst, a pundit, truly the story of this war, other than, oh my God, this is happening, these war crimes are going down, um, is the fact that depending on who you are and where you get your media from, you have vastly different understandings of what is actually going on in Gaza. If you are on Instagram and TikTok, generally, if you're younger and you're following some of these on the ground journalists who were media influencers who just happened to live in Gaza and were travel people, and then they were like, oh crap, now my entire community has been leveled to the ground. You're seeing bodies of babies. You're seeing children covered in soot and their parents saying prayers over them and saying goodbye to them. You're seeing entire neighborhoods leveled. You're seeing ambulance convoys being bombed. You're seeing, a hilarious lack of evidence that the hospitals were used as bases, and all the things that we've talked about on the show. And then if you're a CNN head, which is what they call themselves, or you're an MSNBC, stan, I don't know. Like, you're seeing a completely different picture in large part. I mean, and again, the other thing you're not seeing is context, right? Context about the occupation, context about Israel's other wars on Gaza, context about the discrepancy in civilian deaths in those cases too, right? Somehow we've left it to TikTokers to explain to us, which I know you should immediately be dubious about, and yet there's a huge vacuum when it comes to actually presenting real information. So we don't have honest coverage in mainstream news. So I was having a conversation with a friend lately who just said, look, I've been watching Democracy Now! And kind of mistrustful of a lot of mainstream outlets because all they're really covering is the human interest angle only from the point of Israelis, which the human interest angle is important, but it's like you are literally lifting up just this one family, one group of people over this other group of people that has suffered disproportionately more loss. And so it's a very active thing that's happening right now, to say nothing of buying the Biden line, right? And buying the Biden line of we can draw no red lines on Israel, nor condition aid, although that's being discussed now. And look, hey, I give you a humanitarian pause. So what I think the real story is that depending on how old you are, who you are, and what media platforms you're on, you're getting vastly different information, and that these outlets like MSNBC, like CNN, like the New York Times, like all of these outlets that spend so much time fighting against Trump's cries of you're fake news, you're da 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 da. Well, what Trump was ultimately doing there was he was picking up the threads of sort of the media's lack of credibility from 20 years of the war on terror, right? The lack of credibility, the credibility they lost when they goose stepped with the Pentagon into 2+ wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places, Pakistan, places we've droned, and so on and so forth. And we, as a millennial, we lost complete faith in mainstream news. Then it started sort of building back, but Trump kind of took that and hammered it from a right-wing fascist angle, but picked on some of that truth. And now what's happening? Now all those the idea that this is fake news, the idea that they're not telling you the whole truth, that's actually true. It's come back, right? It's come back around, and the test is always when there's a march to war. How will mainstream outlets react? And they have more amnesia than anyone. And there's some exceptions, right? Joyanne Reid with a certain monologue, Ayman Mohyeldin, Mehdi Hasan, right? MSNBC is doing far better job than CNN has. But all to say that, guys, this is that, for such for lack of a better term, like Trump obsessed, Trump derangement syndrome, mainstream legacy news outlets that really wanted your sympathy when Trump was going after them and received it. I mean, they are obliterating their credibility as we speak, as they deliberately narrow their focus away from the objective truth of who is being killed and slaughtered in mass war crimes, and who had, yes, a terrorist act aggressed upon them, but by comparison is just incomparable. So it scares me, because it scares me for the future, and it scares me for, yes, another Trump run or another neo-fascist run, because again, the media is this fifth estate. They're important. They're supposed to be watchdogs. And when it comes to war, no, they're hook, line, and sinker, the stewards of a lot of whatever is coming out of, the Pentagon or the national security state and apparatus. So yeah, it's funny because I get thrusts back inside. I'm like, why am I feeling 19 again? And it's like, oh, because the mainstream news sucks, and suddenly I'm back to, the war on terror bullshit. And we're all sort of there, and but we didn't have social media. So that's what I'm bitching about. I'm bitching about the fact that this is the biggest story, and that this will have ramifications for decades in terms of, trusting legacy media. And then when all their viewership dies, what are we like? How you gonna get us to pay? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna offer, like, you can't offer that many like loaded tater tots recipes, New York Times. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have to switch it up. You're gonna have to try. You're gonna have to incorporate a lot more astrology to get these young folks on board, or just admit that what's going on is ethnic cleansing. Either way. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.